Hello and welcome to another edition of Hypnosis Helps with me, hypnosis practitioner Neil Myers, and my colleague, hypnosis practitioner Bill Miller. Welcome back. And on this show we're going to talk about success in terms of hypnotic success. If you decide to choose a hypnosis practitioner to work on a goal or a problem that you have, or a colleague or friend has, or a member of your family, what do we mean by success? And specifically, what is necessary, what's required to be successful using this modality?
Right, and I think one of the things you and I have been talking a lot about success criteria and so forth, because you can have two people come in for smoking cessation, and one it works perfectly with, and the other it doesn't. And the question we've been asking is, well, why? Why is that? It's the same hypnotist, you or I, using the same process. And so what, as you know, what been defining these, and we do an interview at the start and try to determine if the person is really ready for the change, and because that's one of the criteria and so forth, and make sure that it's going to be a success for them.
Yeah, and this struck me recently, and it's funny you should mention smoking cessation specifically. This is one of the way this practice works is sometimes you have a run of people wanting to do certain things, and at the moment there have been a lot of people that want to do smoking cessation. Which is one of the things that people most commonly associate with hypnosis.
Right. Yep.
But one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things if you're out there determined to, if you know somebody that smokes, or you yourself are a smoker and you're thinking of stopping using hypnosis, then before you select a hypnosis practitioner, the interesting thing I think you should look at is what questions they ask you.
And that's a very good point, yeah.
Because a lot of people, they come to me, and frequently they've called other hypnosis practitioners, and I tend to be more expensive, so which I tell people straight away. But one of the things that I ask them is, what questions did they ask you? And the most common answer that I get is none. So the conversation goes like this: are you a hypnosis practitioner? Are you a hypnotist? Yes. Do you help people stop smoking? Yes. Can I come down and do that with you? Yes.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Now, by contrast, what we practice and what we've learned over the years is that, as you said, not everybody is ready for that.
Right.
And so one part of our goal is to ensure that everybody that works with us, as far as we can possibly govern it and control it, is successful.
Right.
And so we do a pre-screening on everybody. And in the example of smokers, I can't remember the exact number, but between 25 and 30%, I just say to them, you're not ready to stop smoking. And the methodologies that I use, or anybody else uses hypnotically, will either be unsuccessful or they will be temporarily successful. You might stop smoking for a day, a week, a month, maybe 6 months, but you're not going to stop permanently.
Not permanently.
Because the criteria aren't there for success.
Exactly. And I just want to interject one thing, because you said, well, you're more expensive, but your program, our program, is so much more than almost anything out there. It goes so far beyond. It has so many components so that you hit the problem from so many angles, and that's really why it's more expensive, because it is really a superior product.
Yes. Well, our product and our service is, and all good hypnosis practitioners, I believe, is aimed at people who are aware that they have something that they want to change and are serious about wanting to change it, which is one of the criteria for success.
Right.
And therefore, we feel it's incumbent upon us to deliver to them that result using the best tools that we have available.
Right.
So if somebody says, for smoking, I want to stop smoking, that's an important decision for them. It's an important financial decision. In Connecticut, if you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, that's about $3,500 a year you're spending. 2 packs a day, $7,000 a year. That's about what it's costing. So even financially, that's a decent decision. But in terms of their health, in terms of their emotional well-being, so they deserve a serious program if they're serious people. And if they're not ready, then they deserve to know that this is not going to be effective for you right now.
Right.
And so,
and that's one of the things that I really like about the fact that we're doing this screening, because if you don't, well, they come in, they pay their money, they might quit for a little while if they're not ready, like you said, and they go back to it. So they've really wasted their money on it. Whereas, instead of just taking their money, we'll ask the question and say, well, you're really not ready.
Right.
And so I think it's really ethical, actually, besides anything else, to ask these kind of questions.
I believe so.
And, one of the things that we talk about is, well, what constitutes really being ready, and what constitutes a real desire to do it. And it needs to be deep-seated.
Yes, and let's come back, to my understanding is the definition of success for the dictionary is the achievement of a goal. That's right, Bill?
Right.
So it's measured by the goal. Now, obviously, for smoking cessation, the goal is very straightforward.
Yep.
They want to stop smoking. And a straightforward goal is useful for us in the hypnotic process because it's immediately measurable.
Right. Quite
simply, we know if they stop and they stay stopped, that the program's been successful. I was recently contacted by a friend of a client who came to me a little over 6-7 months ago for smoking cessation, and her friend admitted that they were just waiting for her to start smoking because they'd never known a time when she hadn't smoked.
Right.
And that they were even almost tempting her to smoke. They take her to smoky places, they take her to bars.
Okay, now you're good friends.
She expressed some disappointment because she said, as she puts it, she can't bum a cigarette off her friend anymore.
Yeah.
But she's not. She has no interest in doing it. And the thing that was interesting for me about that, amongst other things, was that even in a smoky environment, it made no difference. It has no meaning for her anymore. She has no desire to do it anymore.
Right.
And so that's a substantial change, and I only expect that to get stronger. But there, the goal of success is really clear: to stop.
Right.
And connected with that is the ability to express consciously, because we deal with subconscious things. That's what we talk about on this program. The ability to express consciously what the goal is.
Right.
And so that leads us back to the things that we're often talking about on this program: the measurements of success.
Right, and I mean, for instance, the one we bandied about was, okay, you want a specific goal. Let's say you've got an infection in your leg. Mm-hmm. The goal is, you would think immediately, well, to get rid of the infection.
Right.
However, in years past, in the 1800s, they would do it by amputating your leg.
Yes, because their goal was to save your life.
Right.
And they didn't know anything, or they didn't know what we know about infection. They only knew that something like an injury could become gangrenous. And if it became gangrenous, the person would die.
Right.
And their criteria of success wasn't saving the leg or ending the infection.
Right.
It was, do they live or do they die?
Right.
And so, therefore, a successful treatment was, in those days, as you put it, lopping off a limb. Cutting off a leg, cutting off a hand, cutting off all sorts.
Yep.
Hence, so many of our heroes from ages past, and heroines as well, had missing limbs because that's what they knew.
Yeah.
Was that a success? In terms of the goal, yes. Would we consider that a success today?
Right.
Probably not, unless it was in the most extreme circumstances.
Right, and there are still extreme circumstances today where, you want to save the limb. That's the first goal, but antibiotics aren't working and things like that. And you go to a second goal, save the person's life, and they still have to occasionally amputate. Right,
and so if we take smoking cessation as an example, through if you look at hypnotic programs such as they were for smoking in the 1930s and 40s, there actually, as far as I could tell, was no real such thing as smoking cessation. There was only to stop excessive smoking.
Right.
Because smoking wasn't considered to be unhealthy or really a problem unless I guess you had one in each hand and one between your toes or smoking. So it was excessive smoking.
Right.
And success was, well, as long as somebody's smoking a reasonable amount, whatever they determine that to be, well, that's success.
Right.
And so we have to know what success is with our clients.
And you mentioned earlier, and it's really important, it has to be success on their terms, in their words.
Absolutely.
And so forth like this. And they have to want it. Like
Absolutely.
With children, somebody might bring their son or daughter and say, well, they're wetting the bed. And when you interview the child, they say, well, I don't really care.
Yeah, and it's I worked with a young lady just the past weekend whose issue was one I've mentioned here before, trichotillomania, which is compulsive hair plucking. And in this instance, the young lady was plucking her eyebrows and particularly her eyelashes.
Right.
And she's only 11 years old, and she'd been doing this behaviour for some years.
Right.
And she'd been in therapy, but it hadn't really helped.
Right.
Which is, for that purpose, not altogether surprising. And the first thing I had to do before I even saw her is ask her, do you want to change this? And why?
Right.
And I really wanted her to tell me. And again, once again, she convinced me. I was convinced she wanted to change. She had good reasons. They were simple reasons. Interestingly enough, for a young lady of 11, she wasn't that interested in her physical appearance.
Yeah.
She was more interested in other things about it. She didn't like the fact that she did it. She didn't want anybody to know that she did such a thing. She thought it was unhealthy and it might hurt her eyes. And she was serious about that. It wasn't
Right.
somebody who was... And so she had a clear goal. And I said to her, one of the keys, and I had this conversation when Mum wasn't in the room.
Right.
Look, it doesn't matter if you want to change this for Mum's reasons, your doctor's reasons, your therapist's reasons, your teacher's reasons. What about you? Do you want it?
Right.
And why?
Right.
And when I was convinced of that, I knew we could be successful.
Right.
And so far she's doing great.
Yep.
It's early days, but we haven't seen any repeat of that behaviour at the moment.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with adults. You know, you get somebody that comes in and says, well, I want to quit smoking. My wife wants me to.
Right.
My husband wants me to.
Right.
And they have a desire to quit smoking themselves, but it's not there for them personally.
No.
It's to satisfy somebody else.
Right.
And a lot of times it's just not going to work then.
No. And it's the clearer people's goals and the clearer their motivation, the greater the likelihood of success. And one of the reasons for that is, as we mentioned before, is that the subconscious mind, which is the realm of mind that we're dealing in, is my mentor described it as the greatest goal-seeking mechanism known to man.
Right.
It drives towards a goal, and we want to make that goal really clear. And the way I like to think of it, it's the alignment of the conscious and subconscious mind towards a goal that somebody wants.
Right.
And that's why, folks, what we do, and never let anybody tell you any different, what we do is not mind control.
Right.
If we were doing mind control, we could make people want or not want things. We can't do that.
Right.
People might tell you that we can do that. They might even delude themselves that they can do that, but true hypnosis does not do that. We can't make people want anything. What we can do is work with what it is that they do want, but they're having difficulty achieving for subconscious reasons. That we can help with.
Right, exactly. But basically, we can't control them, but what we can do is give themselves back control of their own future and things like that, and their own self, because in a lot of cases, something down inside the subconscious is driving them to do something, and they don't really want to. They don't want to keep smoking, but they can't figure out why they can't stop.
Right, and so, again, this comes back to another criteria of success, which is there has to be some strong emotion going on there.
Right.
And so, for example, in smoking cessation, the strongest emotion that's helpful for us is the sense they resent the fact that cigarettes control their lives.
Right.
That attitude towards cigarettes becomes part of the emotional energy that they need to make the process successful.
Right.
And if they don't have that, if they say, well, you know, I've asked people, you know, do you hate cigarettes? And they go, well, no, I actually quite like them. In which case, it's probably not going to work.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I recently, as you know, had working with a phobia client, and you know, it was a difficult case, and it just wasn't working and stuff. And then when I last saw her, she talked about, well, I think I really want to change it, and I've been thinking that. Well, that statement was as stiff as a wet noodle, and I thought, no, you don't want it enough of that, because that's the real problem when we got down to it was the fact that she had so many coping mechanisms in place, and she could live her life. So she's like, well, it's not controlling me, kind of. I'm still okay.
Right.
And basically, I told her, well, this is what you need as far as an attitude and so forth. And if you get to that point where you're really sick of it controlling your life, then we'll do it again.
Yeah,
and then it'll be successful.
Absolutely. And then let's take a couple more of the simpler ones, and then we'll look at the more expensive, more extensive ones, and the more difficult ones to deal with. So sleep, which we've talked about a lot, and which we're going to devote a program to, and hopefully have some people here that have used our programs. But it's very straightforward. You know, if your sleep is interrupted, if you can't get to sleep in a reasonable time, if you're waking up and then can't get to sleep, these are simple goals for success. And people know what they want. They want to sleep. They want to sleep deeply, naturally, for an appropriate period of time. Very clear markers of success, and very clearly and easy to express.
Right.
And we have a screening process for that too, because we can help people with the vast majority of people with the most common sleep problems and issues.
Right.
But there are some for whom they need something else. And we can identify those most of the time through a screening process.
Right.
And so let's go to another example, which is a bit more complex, food.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, and usually that comes up as, when I say food, we're not talking about things like bulimia or anorexia nervosa. I'm talking about weight.
Right. And particularly someone who's significantly overweight, having a real,
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. So
yeah, and again, so when people, I mean, this sort of conversation happens a lot. Oh, you help my friend with smoking cessation. I have a weight problem. Can you help with that? The idea being that if we did something for hypnosis with one, we can do it for the other.
Right.
And that's and then I have to explain. Well, there's a big difference between food and smoking, which is that smoking, nobody ever has to smoke in their whole life.
Right.
But we all have to eat.
Right.
So from a hypnotic standpoint, it's quite different. So therefore, we have to be even more clear as to what people want to be successful. What it means. Do they want to get back to a weight that they were, if they were when they were 18 and they're now 50? Do they want to lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds? Do they want to fit into a dress that they couldn't wear? Do they want to run a marathon? What do they want?
Right.
And why? What's the motivation for them? What's important to them?
Right.
And then we have to change the nature of the relationship to food. It's more complex.
Yeah.
So we spend more time defining the goal. We spend more time with the program. But again, there's a tendency out there, Bill, for people just to give a broad brush. Oh yeah, we can help with weight. We can help with this. Without knowing what it is the client wants to achieve.
And really, it's the specifics, because this is funny, because something just occurred to me about myself that I haven't really thought about too much, but it's kind of curious. As you know, I use self-hypnosis to get to sleep, because I used to lay awake for an hour or more, and I really hated that. And then so I can use it to drop myself to sleep very quickly. Now the other thing is, I used to lay awake for an hour, but I also wake up every hour and a half, right? And so now I use it to get to sleep initially, and when I wake up, I use it to get back to sleep. Well, the question is, why don't I use it to stay asleep, right? And I realize as I'm listening to this, because I don't want that.
Yeah, right.
Because I've always, and I used to say this to people many years ago, that one of the most pleasant experiences in life is that feeling as you just let go and you drift off into sleep. I said, I get to have that 4 or 5 times a night. Why would I want to give that up? And truly, it's because there was something that I didn't even identify till now. Well, why? But if I had tried to do that, or have you help me with it or whatever, it wouldn't have worked, because I don't want that.
Yes, and that comes back, I think, to another very important thing. The only goals that really matter in what we do are our clients' goals.
Right.
Our goals are irrelevant. Our job is to determine early on what our clients' goals are, and if we can give them, by our process, what it is that they want or not.
Right.
So that they know very clearly.
Exactly.
And part of that is what's required of us, and part of that is what's required of them.
Right. So there's a lot of things, and we're going to talk about that, about what are our responsibilities, what are our clients' responsibilities.
Right.
One of the things, though, that to kind of close out on the defining success and so forth, there's also different ways you can achieve it, or try to achieve it, and maybe they have unintended consequences and things like that. You could try aversion.
Yes.
And some hypnotists do that. Like somebody, how many times has somebody said to you or me, "Can you make me just hate chocolate?"
Right.
and things like that. You could temporarily or short term get them to not eat it. But if it's being driven by something, first of all, it's just not a good method to do.
No.
And it won't last.
Right.
And so forth. And then sometimes it has unintended consequences.
Absolutely. I mean, one never knows. One of the things that aversion, folks, is where the idea is we use hypnotic process to make you hate something. And the way that's done is quite simply you link it with something unpleasant in a subconscious state. So if you let's take a really silly example, but if you can take a beautiful rose and link it with a smell of vomit, then every time your subconscious mind, you go towards the rose, you can smell vomit. how long will that effect last? As long as you think that's useful.
Right.
Can your body and mind do that working together? It can. Is it useful? Not really.
Right.
Because what it's doing is setting up very negative emotions in you, negative associations, false associations, and it's really hijacking a part of your mind. It's not me controlling you or Bill controlling you.
Right.
It's you controlling you.
Right.
But not in a productive way.
Right. And then the other thing it can do, let's say you have a drinking problem.
Right.
And you did an aversion type of work with that, and you said, oh, have you ever thrown up from drinking? Yeah. Okay. Now, every time you think of or smell alcohol or whatever, right. You're going to remember that time when you vomited from
right.
it. And yeah, that might keep them from drinking for a short while, but it also, as you pointed out to me a few weeks ago, if a man goes to his daughter's wedding, there's going to probably be alcohol there.
Right.
If he has to go to a dinner with colleagues, there's alcohol there, and now
whether he drinks it or not.
Right. Whether he drinks it or not, and he might feel nauseous just from being next to somebody who's got alcohol. Right
and then because the subconscious mind works through linkage, this might set up other damaging linkages.
Right.
For example,
right.
he might then come to the conclusion that every time he goes to a celebration, he feels sick.
Right.
Or every time he goes to a meeting with a colleague at a restaurant,
right.
he feels nauseous and vomits. Now all of a sudden he's got an aversion to business affairs. He's
right,
got an
you've
aversion
expanded
to social
his
affairs.
aversions.
Right.
Yeah.
You because you're compounding that.
Right.
And so you're exacerbating a problem. You're not helping it.
Right.
So what Bill said, and what we're talking about, is really very, very, very important. Even success we have to understand. Are there consequences for success if we use particular methods?
Right.
And coming back to the limb, lopping off limbs, yeah, the success criteria was that the person lived. The detriment was they had to live minus a limb.
Right.
Which at the time was all that was known.
Right.
So we're always, balancing the benefits with the detriments, if there are detriments. And we do our very best when we work with people hypnotically to ensure that there aren't detriments. And where there are detriments, we tell them,
right,
and so that they know, so that they understand consciously what the deal is, what the bargain is.
Right.
So, for example, here's a simple one about food. On the hypnotic program that we use, listen to this closely, folks. You don't have to diet. Yes,
right.
You heard that correctly. You do not have to diet. But some people love diets. They want to go on diets. They enjoy diets. They think diets are good and beneficial. So if I say to them, one of the things that you have to do to make this successful so that you can reach your ideal healthy weight and stay that way, never to diet again. Now there's an exception to that, for example, diabetics, where obviously they have to, and people who have to not eat certain things for other health related reasons, but I'm talking about people without those problems. If you diet using our programs, the one that you're not going to succeed, because you're sending two contrary messages to the subconscious mind. And so if you want a program which is basically going to force you to stay on a diet, you don't want the program that I offer.
Right.
Right? You want something else. So we have to let clients know what it is. Some people believe that they should lead their life on a ketogenic diet, on a paleo diet, on a Pritikin diet, on a zone diet, on a whatever it is diet. And if they believe that and they want hypnosis to just reinforce that, that's one way of going, and I have done that in the past, but I don't particularly recommend it now.
Right. And one of the things, if you think about it, is that a diet is about deprivation.
Mostly,
it's
yes.
about a lot of.
You can't have it.
Yeah, you can't have this, and you can't have that,
right.
and this and that. Whereas the program we use really emphasizes, you can
satisfaction.
Satisfaction. That's right. Exactly.
Right.
So why don't you give some of the guidelines that
Well, I mean, and again, this might sound shocking to some of you, but the guideline is, yes, folks, you eat when you're hungry.
Right. Yeah.
You stop eating when you're not hungry, and you taste your food. There are other things as well, but what's the importance of this? It may sound very obvious, and say, well, that's obvious. Well, just consider if you're right now experiencing a weight issue, how many times you just override that. You reach a point of satisfaction, you just blow right by it.
Right.
Or the opposite, you let yourself get really, really, really hungry. You don't eat for whatever reason, time or something else, or a diet constrict or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you go crazy with food. So now we can tell you those rules. They're not a secret.
Yep.
they won't work for you in and of themselves without
Yep.
being installed hypnotically. That's what we do.
That's the power.
Then they become a part of your life, and that they become just back to the natural way of eating.
Right.
And we don't tell you what you must eat or what you can't eat. And,
Eat what you like, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Those messages go deep inside your subconscious, and that's why it's so powerful.
Right.
You know. And the thing I liked the other day, I think you were talking to about someone and one of your clients, and you said, well, you know, stop when you're full, right? And then you said, that doesn't mean if you're hungry again in 5 minutes, you can eat again.
Right.
Right? So it's not like, you know, when you stop, oh, that's it.
Right.
You know, if you truly are hungry, you can eat again.
Right.
Right away. Right. So it really allows it so it's not, you know, it's not a deprivation kind of thing.
Right. So we're coming from a complete, so there, the success criteria depends upon the client doing this. And another example, just coming back to smoking, is, and this was, I don't know if you want to.
You can, go ahead, you can say.
So Bill's daughter came to me for smoking cessation.
Right.
And I wouldn't say that, folks, unless she's okay with it.
Yeah,
she's okay to know. So, but the interesting thing occurred was, a short while after we worked, and we worked successfully, there was an erroneous idea there that, how would you put it, Bill? How would you?
About her.
Yes. Because the sort of unconscious, you know, taking of a cigarette and things like that.
Yeah, it was funny. It's like she drifted into smoking again or whatever, and it wasn't like she had made a real decision. It's just kind of happenstance that she drifted into it.
Right.
And I think she had this idea too that, well, if it was 1, 2, or 3, or 4, that's okay.
Right.
You know, whereas, but as we know, that's not good only because you're counteracting the hypnotic messages we've given.
Exactly.
And all that kind of stuff. And she also had associations with, gee, I go out with my dog and walk my dog and I have a cigarette.
Right.
So she doesn't smoke in the house. And, you know, like, well, you know, that association was there and we just had to break that. Just say, no, you go out with your dog and, you know, enjoy it and use the method.
Right. So one of the things we do, folks, is we use a process that we install in you, which is a hypnotic process. This is as an example of smoking. And it's important that you use that process because that process is engaging what we did.
Right.
That's part of the success capability for the client.
Right.
Again, it comes back to the erroneous concept of mind control. People think there's hypnosis, we click our fingers and then everything changes for you. And hypnotists like to foster that delusion because it sounds magical and fun. But the truth of it is that we give you a very, very deep process and then sometimes we ask you to practice something. And in that instance, it's a specific idea of placing your mind on something, taking a breath. And what happens is these things very, very, very quickly just become the replacement for the cigarette habit.
Right.
I mean, but you must use them. If you do not use the tool, or if you try and override the tool, if you try and use willpower instead, you know, people, again, it comes back to food.
Right.
People think they have to will themselves not to eat things or mustn't eat things. And if you're doing that, folks, on the programs that we're talking about and with, you're not going to succeed because we're engaging a much more powerful part of your mind.
And I think that's typical. That's basically what her mindset was. Okay, I've smoked a few. I've got to really buckle down. I've got to use my willpower and stop that.
Right.
And the funny part is, you know, she'd come here, as you know, to do the work with you.
Right.
She lives 4 hours away.
Right.
Well, I happen to be in town for other reasons, and I said, can I do anything with her, you know, to help? And you talked to her and said, yeah, she's willing to, you know, to talk to you about it. And we thought at first I have to do something hypnotically,
right?
You know, to strengthen the suggestions or things like
right.
that. In the end, all I had to do is talk to her about, well, this is the process you were given, right? And all you need to do is really just follow the process.
Exactly.
And I told her, do not use willpower,
right?
Specifically, because that's just, it goes against the process,
right.
And it's not even needed,
right?
You know, and so